gosh, look at the crowd.
Come this way.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
Welcome to LMDtv. I'm Ashwini Vethakan, and joining us this week on Talking Business is the Chief Executive Officer of Plus One, Shantha de Silva. Thank you for joining us on the show, Shantha.
Hi, Ashwini. Great to be here on the session with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
In your opinion, is regenerative leadership the right answer to finding a way out of the pandemic?
I think regenerative leadership is recognized as one of the top trends in 2020. And I think it's an important subject. Instead of only thinking about what employees could give, I think companies need to start thinking about what they could give back to their employees and also to society. If you take the idea of permaculture in farmers, where they use fertile land and do crops side by side with existing crops, I think that's a good example of regeneration and how companies can take an approach to regeneration. I think the time for regenerative leadership is now because our businesses have been disrupted and there's a need for us to re-establish the way we work and what our priorities are going to be. So I think it will be great for companies to now focus on establishing a way of working or a blueprint that can help them achieve a sustainable future for business, for people, and also for the society and the planet.
According to a recent McKinsey report, pandemic fatigue has become a pressing issue for organizations, and companies now find themselves having to support their workers' mental health, emotional, and also financial needs. The techniques that are being used, how practical are they in your opinion?
So I think I read a recent survey that said that employees have rated their mental health as poor 3 times higher than they were rating before. That tells a story of what companies and what people are facing. And I think it is a necessity of the times to put employees' well-being, social, mental, and emotional and financial well-being front and center of company agendas. And I think it's a responsibility for companies to do that. And it doesn't have to be huge initiatives. It's about creating a culture and leading from the front so that it permeates through the organization. I think one thing that this pandemic has shown us is that we cannot only talk, we need to walk the talk as well, because a lot of the variables have changed and we need to show people what we want them to do by doing it ourselves. So some of the simple things that companies can start with is even encouraging people to take time off. In some organizations, people are shy to take time off. They think they are not doing their duty if they take time off. And leaders also sometimes are so focused on their careers, they don't take time off. And if they show the way by taking time off and encouraging people to take time off, that's one small step. A second small step can be about, prioritizing. We all like to be busy, right? We like to do a lot of things. But imagine the stress and the strain it creates on employees and how it impacts their mental well-being and their emotional well-being. So sometimes as leaders, we need to stop and learn to say no and do those things that are important and do less and achieve more out of it. That will also help in general the physical, the emotional well-being of employees. And finally, I think we need to shift the narrative. We can't keep telling people things are going to get better, things are going to get better. I know things will get better eventually, but I think it's better to prepare them by accepting where things are, sharing with them the current reality, and then also showing them what we are doing about it and how we are going to overcome it, rather than saying it's going to get better. And a critical part of that is communication. I think the worst thing that we can do for employees' well-being and emotional well-being is not share messages. Let them kind of think about things and keep imagining what things are going to be. So as leaders, I think it's important to do all those things and also to be communicating constantly and sharing messages constantly in order to take care of the employees.
EQ is more important than IQ. This is a new statement that has become important in today's world. Do you agree with this? And to what extent are businesses in Sri Lanka prepared to embrace this?
So this is the perennial debate, right? EQ or IQ. And I think both has merits. And for me, it's the right thing in the right place at the right time. You can't take a generic approach and say our organization only needs EQ, or you can't say our organization only needs IQ, right? If I give you a practical example, take the hospitality industry, for example, in Sri Lanka, right? Or anywhere in the world. Hospitality industry needs a much higher level of EQ in frontline positions in dealing with guests and colleagues, because no 2 days are the same. No two situations are the same. The situations could be the same, but the impact can be different. So you need a high level of EQ to empathize with the people, whether it's guests or colleagues, but also at the same time to be able to effectively communicate it. So in that scenario, I think EQ is very important. But on the other hand, if we look at a scientist in a lab doing research, or actuary doing market research and analysis, I'm not saying EQ is not important for them, but IQ is much more important for them because of their job function. And I think the companies in Sri Lanka, the way they need to approach this is about not a one size fits all approach. It's about the function, it's about the organization, and being specific about the role and what it requires. And I think to make an organization successful, you need both EQ and IQ. And you need a good balance, but more importantly, you need it in the right places.
And on that note, we'll be going in for a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back as we continue our conversation with the Chief Executive Officer of Plus One, Shantha de Silva. Shantha, which leadership lessons are most applicable and valuable in today's business landscape?
So there's one leadership lesson that I've been holding in my heart, close to my heart for a long time. And this is one leadership lesson that has helped me throughout my career. And I think it has great relevance to where we are today. I referred to Jim Collins before. Jim Collins was the author of Good to Great. And that book talks about how companies are successful and how they behave differently to others. And part of that book, he interviewed Admiral James Stockdale, who was the highest ranking US officer to be imprisoned in Vietnam in the Hanoi Hilton, the famous Hanoi Hilton. And he asked him how he survived those long years in prison. And he said that he never doubted that he will get out of prison. But he also said that he knew he's going to prevail and he's going to turn this experience into a defining moment in his life. And when he was asked who were the people who didn't survive, he said it was those optimists. They had no foundation for their optimism. They kept saying that we'll get out by Christmas. Christmas came, Christmas went, they didn't get out. They said they'll get out by Easter and Thanksgiving and so on and so forth. They had unrealistic optimism that didn't help them survive, and they died of heartbreak. So General Admiral Stockdale survived. And then as a result of his research and discussions with him was born the Stockdale paradox. And the Stockdale paradox says that you need to retain absolute faith that you can prevail in the end, regardless of the current reality and difficulties. And at the same time, confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. So it's two parts. One is about facing your current reality and accepting them, and then retaining faith that you can and will prevail. You'll come out of this and you will achieve success. So it's about accepting the reality, focusing on prevalence and your goals to come out of this, and mapping the journey through that. So for me, that Stockdale paradox is probably one of the most important leadership lessons at any time, and even more so now.
Could you outline the merits of investing in personal development for present and future business leaders?
I mean, look at sportsmen, look at musicians, look at performers. What do? They constantly keep practicing. They probably practice more than actually playing the game because they need to get ready for the game or the performance. You know, there was a famous Olympic skier who won many gold medals for Switzerland. And she was asked what her secret to success was. She said the secret to her success was that she practiced when she felt like it. and she practiced when she didn't feel like it. So irrespective, she kept practicing. Now, if you relate that into the business world, when and where and how do leaders practice? We are on the big stage. We are running businesses. We are making decisions. We are dealing with people. But do we take time to practice? And for me, that practice is what you put into your own personal development. And putting into your own personal development does not mean following courses only, does not mean reading books only, does not mean getting degrees only. For me, that personal development has to be very practical as well. I would encourage a lot of on-the-job development through projects, through responsibilities, through tasks that develop people and help them be better leaders for the future. I think a leader's responsibility is not only generating results, but generating sustainable results. I learned this myself because early on in my career, I was very results focused. And once I engaged a leadership coach, he helped me shift my focus to people. The difference is when you're results focused, it takes a lot out of you and you need to keep doing it to get the same results. But if you shift the focus on people, you're developing people, you're motivating people, you're inspiring people to generate those results. Then suddenly it becomes more sustainable because it's good for the long term. So I think as a leader, one of our prime responsibilities is developing our teams and focusing them on their own personal development. It's very important. I had a leader once who told us that we need to spend at least 10% of our time, work time, on our personal development. And you can imagine the impact it had on the organization. So I think it's a leader's responsibility to do that. And the best success a leader can achieve is that they develop their team so that their role becomes redundant and their team is ready to take it over. That's the epitome of personal development for your teams.
What is your take on inclusivity and diversity in the workplace in Sri Lanka?
I think diversity and inclusion has to become a culture, not a policy. And I think organizations in Sri Lanka need to lead by example. Very often when it comes to diversity and inclusion in many places, it gets practiced at certain levels of the organization, but not across all levels of the organization. Today, I think globally, a lot of companies are adopting diversity and inclusion as a serious business practice. And a lot of global leaders are becoming champions for diversity and inclusion. And in Sri Lanka, I think we need to start at every level of the organization. It's not a mantra that's preached by leaders. It's a mantra that's practiced by leaders. If we want to have diversity in our organization, we need to have diversity at the very highest level of the organization, whether it's board of directors, whether it's senior leaders, and across every level of the organization. And I think there's also a job to do in engaging the team and encouraging the team and showcasing the benefits of diversity and inclusion so that they embrace it as well. And like I said, it has to become a culture. It can't be a process. It can't be a policy. It has to be something that you live and breathe by and something you actually embrace as something that's part of the organization. So I think organizations need to get serious about it, but also not point the finger, take the responsibility themselves at every level of the organization to get on with the diversity and inclusivity agenda. And it's going to be a more and more important topic and subject as we go and as we grow and as generational change happens. It's going to be more and more important for companies. And that might mean the difference between those companies that really do well and the companies that don't really keep up with the rest.
A final question for this evening, Shantha. As organizations now prepare to hire more and more Gen Z employees, how do you think corporate culture will change in the short to medium term to reflect this?
I think if you look at history, right, generational change in company culture has happened, albeit at a slower pace. But in the recent past, it has got accelerated. And sometimes circumstances like we are in today accelerates that change as well. And if you look at Generation Z, for them, diversity is their norm. They accept diversity and inclusion as part of the culture. And that, again, to the previous point, will help accelerate the diversity and inclusion in companies. And they're kind of digital natives. They were born with digital in the digital era, and they're much more comfortable with digital initiatives. They're probably more dependent on it than any other generation that we know of. And I think they're quite mature and financially minded, and they know how to take care, or they know the approach to their emotional well-being as well, much more conscious than a lot of the other generations we've had before. So I think it's important for companies to embrace these values of Generation Z and inculcate them in the organization if they want to attract Generation Z. And I think one way to do that is to embed more younger generation of leaders in organizations that can accelerate change and bring on change, because at the end of the day, companies will need to embrace this generation in order for them to achieve long-term sustainable growth, and they will need to adapt their businesses to make it a place that Generation Z will want to work in.
And that's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you for joining us on the show this evening, Shantha.
Thank you for the opportunity. Great having a chat with you.
Coming up, we have a roundup of global news. Stay tuned.
You love the feeling of being renewed. To stay beautiful every single day. To breathe just like we do, because you are truly delicate, protecting the ones who've been with us through the years. With Sayalac Care, the only wood coating that truly protects you. Sayalac Wood Coatings from JAT.
Welcome back to the show, and here's a roundup of global news. The Ukrainian oil and media tycoon and owner of Warner Brothers Music, Sir Leonard Blatnovic, topped the UK's latest Sunday Times rich list. His wealth skyrocketed to £23 billion, with a surge of £7.2 billion during the year. He took over the title previously held by Sir James Dyson. The price of Bitcoin fell below $34,000 for the first time in 3 months on Wednesday after China imposed fresh curbs on cryptocurrencies. Meanwhile, other digital currencies such as Ether and Dogecoin lost as much as 22% and 24% respectively. Apple is paying up to $189 in compensation to customers of the Apple Powerbeats 2 headphones in the US. This is in response to a class action lawsuit filed in 2017, which claimed that the headphones did not retain battery life and were not sweat or water resistant. To this end, any customers who purchased the product before August 2020 were eligible to receive a payout. India's national carrier Air India revealed that a cyber attack on its data servers affected about 4.5 million customers around the world. The breach was first reported to the company in February. Details including passport and ticket information as well as credit card data were compromised. And finally, CEO of Apple Tim Cook took the witness stand during his company's legal battle against Epic Games. Epic claimed that Apple's tight control over iPhone apps hurt competition. In his defense, Cook argued that keeping control of the Apple Store helped to keep the phone secure. He also stated that he was unaware if the App Store made a profit because the company did not break down the figures. And that's all we have for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.